This is a bit more of a vulnerable message, but I wanted to share it, and hopefully there's someone out there that resonates. It's also 4:44, so I feel like that's a good sign. But I wanted to talk about grief, and specifically, I wanted to talk about grieving someone who is still alive, and the idea of mourning someone when it isn't that they are gone or that they've passed on, but that the version of them that exists and the version of you that exists, or me, are not the same as we were before. And the thing is, I've experienced this multiple times throughout my life. So I've seen this with like friendships, I've seen this with romantic connections, and I think it's difficult in a lot of ways. I think in a myriad of ways, because it's, for one thing, like, you remember the moments of time that you spent with this person or that you had with them where it was like so much love was shared, so much goodness was shared. There's a lot of memories, there are a lot of emotions, a lot of thoughts, and kind of like, basically it's like, the different versions of you and the different versions of them that existed together, that existed apart. And it's very strange, because I'm thinking of that quote that's like, or it's a song, I believe. It's a song by an artist called Celeste, and it's like from strangers to lovers to strangers again. And I feel like this applies no matter what the relationship is, but it's like there was a point in time where maybe you didn't know this person and you were just living your lives and existing separately, and then you came together, and it's like so much changed through that. And so there's that kind of feeling that comes up. And then a little bit different is maybe someone who you have known your whole life, like this could be a relative, or like a close friend that you've had since you were a child. And it's like, my cat loves to interrupt my videos, I swear. um Cats could be significant for you. You could have like a really like ADHD cat, because I feel like my cat has ADHD. But anyways, it's like, it's a different kind of pain, I feel like. And I'm not going to speak on grief of losing a loved one, because I can't speak on that in terms of a very close loved one. There are a few people that I've known that have passed on, and that is also like very jarring, and indescribable and unimaginable. So I'm not trying to speak to that, but I am speaking to the feeling of loss when it comes to someone who is still alive. And it's like you have this knowing that they're just out there living their life and you're living your life. And I think for a long time, for me, I was like very afraid of being left behind and abandoned and rejected, and that was like my whole wound, and like trauma, from an early age. And it's different, I think, when you heal through that. And it's not that that feeling doesn't come up or like you don't feel that way, but I think it's different when you know that like you're not being abandoned. It's just like that person is no longer aligned with you, you're not aligned with them, so you naturally like go your separate ways. But it's kind of this feeling of like, it is a feeling of loss, and it's a feeling of, there's a disconnect between maybe the version of you that knew them and the version of you that you are now, where it's like, I don't really know you like that anymore, like there's not as much resonance, or maybe there's no resonance, maybe you and this person, your lives are so different, like the way that you think, the way that you choose to do things, like who you're around, like it's just changed. And it's strange. And I'm thinking of like a desert, like the idea of like a desert between you and someone else, it's just this vast space. And so it's like, what do you do with those emotions? What do you do with the version of them that you knew? And how do you kind of like reconcile those differences within yourself? And I feel like that is what so much of the mourning process is, or the grieving process. You know, there's like the 5 stages of grief, and I think that definitely applies to connections that are still very much alive, but it's like they're no longer your connection, you know? And I think for me, it's a lot about honoring the emotions that come up and not trying to kind of like villainize those emotions and feel like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this. Like, I have to like distract myself, or I have to act like everything's fine and it doesn't bother me, it doesn't hurt me, it doesn't come up. Like, I think it's honoring the truth of your emotions, the rawness of them, the vulnerability in that, and just knowing like you have every right to feel that sadness, that pain, you know, the hurt, the disappointment. If you feel frustrated, if you feel angry, if you feel just like shit, like you are allowed to feel all of those emotions, and to move through them, you know, because our emotions are like, they're water. It's like the element of water. So it needs to move through us. It needs to be able to flow. It needs to have a channel that it can move through. And then also, you know, there's part of it that's like reflection and maybe thinking about like who you were with this person, you know, and what did they teach you and what did you teach them. And I think there's so much beauty in the connections that we have, because it's like out of the billions of people on this planet, okay, and then, you know, thinking about everything like on a fucking cosmic level, it's like I came across this person, they came across me, like we shared 6 months, we shared 6 years, and it's like something about that being so special. And, you know, even if it wasn't like, that's not the way that you remember it, I think to still be able to like take the time to honor what that was in your life, because there was something there for you, even if it wasn't what you wanted, even if it was awful, honestly, even if it was a shitty, terrible experience, like you learned something, you experienced something that your soul needed to experience. You moved through karma that your soul needed to clear out. Like something needed to be balanced, something needed to be excavated from that experience. And, you know, it's not always like a success story. It doesn't always feel successful. It doesn't always feel great. But I think it's still worth honoring. It's still worth like even giving yourself the ability to have forgiveness for yourself or others, or like accept what something is. And I think the last thing for me is like, I am a writer, and I love to capture, or try to capture, experiences and people and things through my words. And so, you know, for you, whatever that medium might be, maybe you're an artist, or you know, maybe you build things, maybe you are an athlete, like there's a way that you can channel this grief and channel this pain into something powerful, and that is you know, your alchemy, and it's for you. And I think sometimes when we grieve and we feel like this loss, it's like we get kind of like caught up in the emotions of it, and that we don't necessarily feel like maybe that we have like the power of those emotions. And to us, like, it can feel like, oh, this is just weighing on me. It feels like, you know, a burden, or it's something I don't even want to think about. And maybe in that feeling, right, in that emotion, in that desolation of it, it can be turned into something else. And so it doesn't have to be, you know, this big like display or anything, you know, but I think even just on an intimate level with yourself, like maybe you create like a little, I don't know, like a little section on your notes app, and you write something down about this connection, and that is your like memorial to it. In a way, that is your ode to what it once was. And I think in that way, grief can be extremely powerful, because it is the reminder of love. And yeah, so I pray that if you are experiencing grief right now and you're mourning someone who's very much alive, and it feels like death, that you remember that there's a rebirth process and there's a renewal for you.